Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time of torches and towering castles, woolen gowns and whispered glances, where a single braid could cause a stir in the most proper of courts. You find yourself walking down a candle-lit corridor lined with tapestries, the air thick with beeswax and secrets. Somewhere ahead, a young noblewoman sits before her mirror, brushing her hair with slow, deliberate strokes, hair that soon, unknowingly, will alter the course of her life. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for. Like, why were people so obsessed with braids back then? So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel. Like and share this video. Or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. I'd love to know where and when you started watching this video, or maybe just leave a compliment for the hairstyle you picture in your mind by the end. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You walk quietly toward the lady's chamber. The air carries the faint scent of lavender, of lye soap, and the rose water her maid prepared just before sunrise. As you push open the heavy wooden door, you step into a room awash in gold light, diffused through linen-draped windows. The bed is large and canopied, its pillows arranged like pages of a silent book. But all your focus goes to the figure at the dressing table. She sits with her back to the room, her hair long, unbound, the color of warm wheat just before harvest. Her maid stands behind her, fingers twisting and looping each strand into careful order. A braid begins to take shape, 3 strands at first, then 4, folding over each other like ribboned history. And you can see in her posture, calm but watchful, that she knows the world is watching. Not this room, not right now, but soon. This braid isn't just a braid. It's a message. Historians still argue whether women of high status had full agency over their appearance in the 14th century. Some say every braid and bonnet had to follow rules of class, virtue, and family honor. Others argue the opposite, that women bent those very rules in small, quiet ways. A curl left free, a ribbon folded into the twist, a length of hair longer than what was modest. This lady, let's call her Iselda, knows the difference. And today, she's not just getting dressed. She's preparing, the court gathering is hours away, but her pulse is already quick. Her hair must survive it all, the warmth of the hall, the whispers of matrons, the curious glances of courtiers, and maybe, just maybe, the gaze of a particular knight. She's heard rumors he's returned from the borderlands, taller now, darker than before, and with a scar across his temple that only makes his stories more delicious. But she's not waiting for him, not exactly. Still, when the maid asks whether she'd like the usual side braid and linen coif, Iselda shakes her head. No, the other one. The foreign style. The maid hesitates. You mean the twist they wear in Provence? Iselda nods slowly. A hairstyle from another court. A quiet risk, but not a dangerous one. Not yet. Enough to stir conversation, but not scandal. And that, in a castle like this, is a razor's edge you learn to balance on early. A quirky rumor that's floated through the castle kitchen speaks of a lady once banished for braiding her hair too high. It was seen as a challenge to the Duchess. Another story tells of a girl who was proposed to by 3 men in 1 week, simply because she brushed her hair loose one evening and walked past the chapel looking like a painting. Hair in this world is more than style. It's currency. The maid begins again, fingers deft now. The braid takes shape, folded near the crown. pulled into a double twist, secured with a ribbon the color of dried rose petals. Iselda breathes deeply and glances at herself in the polished mirror. Not made of glass, this is polished metal, the kind that shimmers rather than reflects. But she likes the shimmer. It leaves room for imagination. She stands and walks toward her wardrobe, the braid swaying gently behind her like a banner before battle. Outside, the bells ring for morning prayer. The day is beginning, and her braid will carry her through it. You step aside as she brushes past, unaware of the ripple she's about to send through the court, through her future, because sometimes love doesn't begin with a glance or a word. Sometimes it begins with a braid, and a lady who decides, just once, to wear her hair the way she wants. You trail behind Iselda as she leaves her chamber, her braid glinting softly in the morning light. And you can't help but notice how even her footsteps carry a different rhythm today, measured, composed, and just slow enough to suggest she knows she'll be watched. Her gown rustles faintly, dyed in a muted green that sets off the rose-colored ribbon tied at the end of her braid. You've seen her move through these corridors before, but this morning, there's a stillness around her, the kind you feel before something shifts. The corridor leads to the Ladies' Solar, the room where noblewomen spend their mornings, embroidering, receiving visitors, and most crucially, being observed without seeming to be. Inside, it's warm and quiet. A maid adds a few rosemary branches to the brazier, scenting the air with something clean and calm. Iselda settles by the tall, arched window and reaches for her basket of embroidery, but her eyes flick briefly to the polished pitcher nearby. Its curve reflects a subtle outline, her braid visible, just at the edge. She smiles, just slightly, because for a medieval lady, this is as close to flirting with herself as one could get. Hair in the Middle Ages was an intense subject, both sacred and sensual. Unmarried women wore theirs long and loose only in private. In public, the rule was simple. Hair must be braided, wrapped, or hidden under a veil. The more noble your blood, the more intricate your style. And yet, there was always room for small rebellions. Historians still argue whether these private grooming rituals were acts of pure vanity or subtle resistance. Some say the repetitive brushing and braiding was meditative, a way to reconnect with oneself. Others believe it was performance, practicing seduction in the only space where it was permitted. You watch as Iselda runs her hand lightly down the length of her braid. There's something sacred in the motion, not religious exactly, but deeply personal, like prayer dressed in silk and hair oil. A knock at the solar door draws the attention of everyone inside. It's another noblewoman, older, with rings on every finger and eyes like a sparrow, sharp and constantly darting. She pauses in the doorway. "My dear," she says, voice smooth as wine. "That's a rather southern twist you've chosen." Iselda looks up slowly, her tone neutral. "Do you like it?" The older woman steps closer, inspecting the braid as if it were a tapestry. "It's daring," she says at last. "Of course, you've always had such thick hair. You can get away with things." A compliment wrapped in a cut. Iselda simply returns to her stitching, which today is nothing more than a field of blue thread, sky perhaps, or sea. But her braid says everything she doesn't. Later that morning, you follow her to the chapel. Not for prayer, though that's what others believe. She walks alone, the braid still intact, though a single thread of hair has escaped near her temple. It softens her, adds a kind of dreamy imperfection. She doesn't fix it. This is important, because that loose strand, that's what someone will remember. You pause in the back pew, watching her kneel. There's no one else in the chapel, just a scattering of rose petals left behind from the matins ritual. She doesn't look toward the altar. She looks at the floor, as if her thoughts are somewhere else entirely. Do you remember the night from before, the one said to have returned? She hasn't seen him yet. Not directly, but she's heard the whispers, the heavy boots on stone, the way the guards at the gate shifted nervously when someone walked through. She's preparing, and part of that preparation is the hair. Always the hair. In some regions, noblewomen believed that brushing their hair exactly 100 times brought clarity of heart. Others believed the number had to be prime, or divisible by the number of children their mother had. Some used combs carved from bone. Others used fingers only, claiming that tools confused the strands. A quirky belief from a manor south of Toulouse said that if your braid unraveled on its own during the day, someone you were meant to love was nearby. So naturally, girls began braiding their hair looser on days they hoped to be noticed. Iselda's braid holds, but not tightly, and that matters. You follow her out of the chapel, down the colonnade, past the herb garden where bees buzz sleepily around the sage. She pauses to inhale the rosemary, plucks a sprig, and tucks it into the ribbon at the end of her braid. It's subtle, nearly invisible, but you see it, and so you suspect will someone else, because even in a world of rules and rituals, hair was the one part of a woman's body she could still claim, if only briefly, if only in layers, if only through suggestion. The rosemary is a signal of memory, of longing, of clarity, and perhaps of someone she hasn't quite admitted she's hoping to see. You drift behind her, just out of view, just ahead of fate. Her fingers brush the edge of her braid again, and far off, behind the stables, boots scrape stone. The breeze rises as you step into the outer courtyard with her, lifting the hem of her gown and tugging gently at the ends of her braid. The rosemary sprig dances like a secret, visible only to those who know what to look for. She moves with the grace of someone who doesn't rush, but never lingers too long. Her shadow stretches ahead of her, tall and soft, across the flagstones worn smooth by centuries of noble steps. Around her, the courtyard stirs. Pages hurry with baskets of kindling. A washerwoman empties a basin into the well trench. Far above, a falcon circles once, then disappears over the chapel tower. And still, that braid, it swings with rhythm, confidence. And beneath the sun, the ribbon catches the light just enough to earn a second glance, which it does, because from across the yard, near the garrison wall, he sees it. The knight, he's not armored now, just dressed plainly in a dark tunic with leather trim, one hand resting on the hilt of a sword worn more out of habit than readiness. His gaze is level, thoughtful, unreadable. But when it lands on her braid, yes, it pauses. Not her face, not her figure, her braid. Historians still argue whether gestures like this, hairstyles, color signals, floral hints, were read consciously or unconsciously in courtship. Was it fashion that stirred hearts, or the person beneath it? But in a world where glances were the closest thing to conversation, the language of appearance was fluent and intentional, and she knows he's looking, but doesn't look back. Not yet. Instead, she adjusts the braid at her shoulder, almost as if shielding it from the sun, though it's not the sun she's thinking about. She turns, skirts a garden wall, and disappears behind the citrus trees. You follow the knight now. He doesn't speak, but something has shifted in the set of his shoulders. His eyes narrow, not in suspicion, but in recognition. A flicker of memory, perhaps. Maybe he's seen that braid before in a different time, a different court, on someone whose name he never asked, but couldn't forget. Or maybe this is new, a beginning dressed as déjà vu. He moves slowly now, toward the outer cloister, where monks used to walk and whispers still hang like ivy from the arches. You pause there, noticing the way one of the old stone fountains has dried up. A vine pushes through the crack. Even in stillness, things shift, grow, just like her braids, because braided hair wasn't always static. In the Middle Ages, it evolved. There were single plaits, double braids coiled at the ears, woven styles wrapped around ribboned frameworks, even elaborate styles named after saints. A woman's braid could mark her as maiden, wife, widow, or temptress. Often, it was all three at once, and beneath the surface, meaning tangled with tradition. A quirky belief from the northern reaches claimed that women who wore their braids to the left side were prone to melancholy love. To the right, reckless romance. Iselda's falls straight down her spine. What does that say? Balanced or undecided? You recall the older noblewoman in the solar, how quickly she noticed the difference. Hairstyles among the upper class were scrutinized as closely as landholdings. A new twist could be seen as ambition. A loose braid, vulnerability. A tight coil, control. No wonder the court was always whispering. Iselda walks now near the stable door, nodding politely to a groom before slipping through an arch into the orchard path. The knight, following at a measured pace, doesn't hurry. This isn't a chase. It's choreography. A slow, deliberate unraveling. And around them, life continues. Because for every meaningful braid at court, there were dozens worn for sheer practicality. Milkmaids twisted their hair to keep it from their eyes. Nuns shaved theirs completely. Soldiers' wives wore tight knots laced with leather in case of fire. But even these styles carried meaning. Hair told stories. Even when no one spoke, the night pauses at the edge of the orchard. The trees are heavy with green fruit, their scent sharp and fresh. Somewhere ahead, the edge of her gown disappears behind a hedge. He could follow, but he doesn't. Not yet. He waits, and she knows he's waiting. Do you remember the single strand near her temple? The one she left loose? It's curled a little more now, touched by sweat, by sun, by hope. And he's looking at that strand more than the braid now. Because sometimes, the detail we didn't mean to leave out, the strand that slips, the loop that loosens, is what draws the heart. Still, he says nothing. Because this is not the moment. Not yet. But it's close, so very close. You follow Iselda deeper into the orchard, where the world feels both quieter and more alive. Bees hum lazily near the blossoms. The breeze moves gently through the low trees, shifting shadows in careful waves. And every so often, a fruit drops, thump, onto the earth, unnoticed except by the small creatures rustling beneath the leaves. She's alone now, alone enough to breathe differently, to let her shoulders fall a little, to tilt her face toward the sky like she's trying to remember what it's like to feel sunshine without consequence. And for a moment, she simply stands there beneath the branches. The braid rests gently along her back, thick and coiled in the new style she's chosen, the foreign one. It's called the Provençal loop, a 4-strand braid that crosses once at the top, weaves down the center, and finishes with a side twist secured by ribbon or comb. It's bold without being loud, structured without being severe, and it whispers something that other braids don't. Confidence, not arrogance, not seduction, but the kind of inner certainty that makes people turn their heads before they know why. Historians still argue whether styles like this spread through trade, marriage, or rebellion. Some claim the style originated in a convent outside Arles, created by nuns who weren't ready to stop weaving beauty just because they'd taken vows. Others say it was inspired by Moorish influence, a crossing of patterns, just like a crossing of cultures. Whatever its origin, it arrived at court like a question. And Iselda, without ever leaving the orchard, has answered it. Her fingers reach up now, gently adjusting the braid, not to change it, but to feel it, to remind herself of what she made this morning, not just with her maid's help, but with her own intention. Because even though her handmaid twisted most of the strands, Iselda chose it, and choice is power. You walk beside her now, shoes brushing against the soft earth. She doesn't see you, but you feel her restlessness, the kind that comes not from anxiety, but from anticipation, like something's building, just beneath the skin, just behind the eyes, just inside the chest. A bird calls overhead, a long trill that sounds almost like laughter. She glances up, smiles softly, and finally reaches into her sleeve. From it, she pulls a small silver comb, not decorative, not jeweled, just simple, with the symbol of a half-moon etched into the side. And here, alone in the orchard, she does something unexpected. She begins to undo the braid. One loop, then another. Strand by strand, she reverses the morning's creation until her hair falls loosely down her back, not wild, but free. She lifts the silver comb and runs it gently through each section, separating them again, not because she regrets the braid, but because she wants to try it herself. The same pattern, the same foreign style, but this time made by her own hands. It's not perfect. One strand tangles near her ear, another pulls too tight on the left. But she keeps going, lips pursed in quiet concentration, brow furrowed as if solving a riddle without words. And you realize this isn't vanity. This is rehearsal, not for a ball, not for a judgment, not even for a night, but for ownership. She's making her hair her own, and just as she secures the final loop, tying it with the same rose-colored ribbon, still scented with rosemary, she hears something, a boot step, not close, not loud, just enough. She turns toward the sound. No one is there. Not yet, but she knows what she heard. She doesn't panic, doesn't hurry. She finishes the braid, her braid, and smooths the end with her fingers. A quirky legend from Avignon tells of a noblewoman who wove spells into her hair each morning, believing that braiding her thoughts into the strands would keep them safe from prying eyes. If the braid unraveled, so would her secrets. Iselda's braid holds, but this one holds something else. Not secrecy, not seduction, but possibility. You remember the way she looked at her reflection that morning, half smile, half doubt. That doubt is gone now. Not because of magic, not because of fate, but because she made the thing she wore, she shaped it, owned it. And now, she wears it not for them, not even for him, for herself. The sun moves higher, casting dappled gold along the orchard path. A shadow appears at the far end of the row. A figure, broad-shouldered, steady. The knight? Maybe, maybe not. Iselda doesn't move toward him. She turns, instead, toward the narrow gate that leads back to the herb garden. Her braid swings with her steps, slightly off-center now, just like before. But it doesn't matter. It was hers. And soon, he'll notice. And when he does, he won't just see a braid. He'll see the woman who made it. You follow Iselda through the herb garden gate, where the air is thicker with scent, sage, marjoram, lavender, and each step feels cushioned by the soft, spongy moss beneath your feet. The garden is quiet except for the gentle rustle of wind through thyme bushes and the distant clatter of pots from the kitchens nearby. She walks the narrow stone path slowly, braid freshly redone and held high with that ribbon, no longer an experiment, now a declaration. The sun glints off her silver comb tucked neatly back into her sleeve, as though it were a dagger. You notice the way she holds her chin slightly higher, how her footsteps feel firmer. She's no longer hoping to be seen. She's expecting it. And just as she passes under the twisted vine arch toward the main lawn, the feast bell rings. Its long, low tone vibrates through the air. She pauses, smooths the sides of her braid, and steps forward. It's the late afternoon feast, not quite the grand dinner, but significant enough that every noble visitor and half-important hanger-on will be there. It's held in the upper hall, a long chamber of arched beams, golden candlesticks, and walls dressed in tapestries so aged they look like ancient dreams. As Iselda enters, the air changes. You feel it before you see it, the ripple, the almost inaudible breath that passes through the rows of seated nobles like wind brushing wheat. It's not her dress. It's not her voice. She hasn't even spoken yet. It's her hair. The Provençal loop, now woven tighter than earlier, glints subtly in the candlelight, the braid crossing in an unfamiliar but elegant twist. The rose-colored ribbon with the rosemary sprig is still in place, but now offset slightly to the left, drawing the eye, deliberate, curious. And all around the hall, glances begin to collect like dust on polished wood. No one says anything directly. Of course not. This is court. But Lady Vaillant leans in a bit too close to her husband and whispers behind a fan. Sir Almeric furrows his brow and raises one grizzled eyebrow, whispering something about southern tastes. Even the steward pauses before announcing the fish. You spot the knight. He's at the far table near the bannered wall, standing now as she approaches. His expression is unreadable, but you notice how his hand drops from his cup and his jaw shifts slightly. His eyes don't leave the braid, and she sees him. She meets his gaze, just for a second, just enough to acknowledge him, just enough to let him wonder. Then she looks away. Do you remember the stories of troubadours, weaving longing into melodies? In the same way, Iselda has done this with her hair, and the effect is no less powerful. Historians still argue whether hairstyles like these were worn solely for admiration, or whether they were used as part of coded courtship, an unspoken system of signaling interest, desire, defiance. Some records mention specific placements of ribbons or sprigs of herbs as cues: rosemary for remembrance, violet for modesty, rue for regret. The rosemary, that's no accident. A quirky record from the Abbey of Roussillon documents an entire language of the braid, taught to girls of noble birth: 3 loops for longing, 2 knots for chastity, a leftward twist for courage, a braided stem of rosemary to keep his eyes. No one knows how seriously it was taken, but Iselda's braid has all 4. The steward calls her name now, offering her seat closer to the head of the table than she expected. She accepts with a soft smile, though you catch the flicker of surprise that crosses her features. The braid has already begun to do its work. Through the feast, she remains composed, eating little, listening much, but her head is turned just enough so that anyone speaking to her must look at the braid. Even the Duchess, who rarely comments on appearance, remarks with pointed curiosity, "What inspired your hair today, child?" Iselda tilts her head, smile poised. "I dreamed of the sea," she says. "That's all." And suddenly, the hairstyle is not just Southern, it's mystical. It's here that you understand the full genius of what she's done. Because the moment her style is questioned, she doesn't defend it. She enchants it. And when the knight finally walks by her chair on the way to refill his cup, he pauses, only slightly, and says, "That braid looks like it was made by moonlight." She glances up. "Then perhaps it was," she replies, her voice feather-light. Not flirtation, not flattery, just suggestion. He continues on. But something in the room has changed. The braid, once a mere experiment in a chamber, now walks among prophecy and poetry. It's no longer simply foreign, it's unforgettable. You leave the feast behind her now as the candles burn lower and the hall begins to empty. She rises, braid still perfect, ribbon still intact, and walks alone back toward her chamber. Her face shows no smugness, no pride, just calm and the faintest flicker of something else. Victory? No, not yet. But it's close, so very close. You drift alongside her as she returns from the feast, through the lantern-lit corridors that wind like soft threads back toward her wing of the castle. Her steps echo lightly, measured and unhurried, as if the walls themselves have noticed what just happened in the great hall. The braid sways gently behind her like a metronome, still secure, still perfect. The rosemary sprig has held, its scent faint but present. She doesn't smile, not quite, but her expression holds something quiet and strange, like a song only she hears. And it's still playing as she steps onto the balcony overlooking the inner courtyard, where the world rests under velvet night. Below, torches flicker along the perimeter, their light painting moving shadows along the stone. Servants hurry to finish evening duties. A pair of cats dance around the base of a rain barrel. And by the far gate, half hidden in the deeper dark, he stands there, the knight. Not cloaked, not armored. Just him, leaning one shoulder against the wall, his gaze lifted not toward the stars, but directly at her. The moment holds. Neither of them moves. Neither speaks. But something in the air becomes denser, like a thread tightening, invisible and tense. You feel her fingers twitch at her side. Not fear, not nervousness, something else. Recognition. It's not the first time their paths have crossed. You realize it now. They've seen each other before, years ago, briefly. A tournament, a border crossing, a misdelivered letter, perhaps. But nothing ever came of it. He left. She remained. And now, a hairstyle has reopened a door that never quite closed. Historians still argue whether courtly love was practiced as genuinely as it was written. Some claim it was nothing more than a literary game, a performance for prestige. Others insist that many knights and ladies walked a razor's edge between fantasy and scandal, weaving emotional truth into the safest possible spaces. But what's unfolding here doesn't feel like performance. It feels like a reawakening. A quirky passage from a forgotten poet tells of a lady whose hair changed color in the moonlight, drawing back a man she thought lost forever. Likely fiction. Still, Iselda's braid, bathed in silver light, seems to glow. She doesn't call to him. She simply stays, anchored by the braid that now feels like an extension of her voice. And slowly, the knight steps away from the wall and moves toward the stairs. He's coming up. Each step is slow, purposeful. You hear the soft creak of worn leather, the faint clink of the dagger at his hip. And then he's there, just a few feet away on the balcony, his gaze steady, not bold but open. "You returned," she says quietly. I did, he replies, and for a moment, neither says anything else. The wind brushes a strand of her hair free from the braid and across her cheek. She doesn't fix it. He notices. I wasn't sure you remembered me, he says. I wasn't sure you remembered how to look. That earns the softest smile from him. A real one. Uneven and small, but there. You wear your hair differently now. And you wear a different face, she says. But the eyes are the same. He nods. The braid suits you. Does it? Yes. And then, gently, like asking permission with his breath more than his body, he lifts his hand slightly, not quite reaching her hair, just nearing it. She doesn't move. The wind picks up, lifting the tail of her braid like a whisper. And you can feel it, the whole moment balancing on whether or not he touches it. But he doesn't. Instead, he lowers his hand again. I shouldn't ruin it, he says. It looks as though it took hours. It didn't, she replies. Just a few careful minutes, and one decision. To wear it like that? To wear it for me? That lands. He bows slightly, not mockingly, not stiffly, a motion both respectful and full of something unspoken. Then he steps back, giving her space again. I'd like to speak again, he says. Somewhere quieter. She considers, and then, with a gentle nod, there's a fig tree near the south wall. Morning sun, little wind. I'll find it. She turns away then, braid swinging like punctuation behind her. The conversation ends not in tension, but in a promise that feels older than words. You walk with her back to her chamber. The hallway feels different now. Not shorter or longer, just deeper, as though the castle itself has taken notice. Back in her room, she sits before the mirror again, touches the braid one last time, then begins to untie the ribbon. Not because it's over, but because it's begun. And tomorrow, she may need a new braid entirely. Dawn arrives wrapped in mist, soft and slow. It slips into the stone courtyard like a secret, brushing the edges of ivy and warming the leaded glass windows with pale gold. You hear the quiet shuffle of servants waking the castle, the low murmur of boiling water, the rustle of brooms. But within the walls of the lady's chamber, all is still. Iselda stands before her mirror again. The braid is gone now, unwoven before sleep, the rosemary sprig tucked into her night table drawer, still fragrant. Her hair hangs long and loose, rippling like silk washed in moonlight. But today, she will braid it again, differently. This time, without the help of her maid. You watch as she lifts her arms, separates the sections, and begins slowly. She doesn't look at herself. She looks through the reflection, as though she's seeing not herself, but someone watching from the other side of the glass. She begins the first twist, low and a little off-center. Not the Provençal loop this time. Something simpler, subtle, but elegant. A court braid with a tiny spiral tucked beneath. A variation only the attentive would notice. You remember the knight's words from last night. The braid suits you. She remembers too. And this morning, her hairstyle is no longer a signal. It's a response. By the time she steps into the morning sun, the mist has lifted, and her braid rests over her shoulder like a sash, tied loosely with the same rose-colored ribbon. But no rosemary today. That would be too obvious. In the great hall, the murmur begins almost immediately. You can feel it, can't you? The glances, the way conversations pause half a breath longer than necessary. Lady Vian eyes her from beneath her veil, whispering again behind that ridiculous peacock feather fan. It's different again, she murmurs to no one in particular. The Duchess's steward nods without thinking, squinting toward Iselda like a scholar might squint at a riddle. Even the cook, bustling into the corridor with a basket of pears, glances at her and mutters something under her breath, something about witchcraft. Not in fear, in awe, because while the braid is small, the effect is not. In a world where repetition is expected, change is louder than any trumpet. And Iselda has now changed her braid twice. Historians still argue whether medieval courts truly cared about these shifts in women's appearances or whether chroniclers simply amplified them. But anecdotal accounts suggest something else, that small details like hair, perfume, or shoe color could spark entire feasts worth of gossip. And gossip in a castle? That's currency. You hear it now among the chambermaids folding linens, the stable hands wiping down saddles. Did you see it this morning? It's a different knot. She must be trying to catch the bishop's eye. No, it's for him. And him needs no explanation, because even the baker's boy knows. The night. And when he enters the hall not long after, a hush falls, so slight you might miss it, like the breath taken before a bell tolls. He walks slowly, not directly toward her, but in her direction. His eyes flick to the braid. He notices. Of course he does. But he doesn't approach. That would be too fast. Instead, he lets her pass him in the corridor, close enough that the edge of her ribbon brushes the sleeve of his tunic. And that's all it takes. Their eyes meet, just briefly. But the braid has done its work again. A quirky note scribbled in the margin of a 13th century sermon tells of a noble lady whose daily braid changes were tracked more obsessively than the harvest. It reads, "She changed her knots like the sky changed clouds, and every man swore she spoke only to him." Iselda doesn't need to speak. Her braid speaks for her, but not everyone is pleased. Lady Vian, predictably, is the first to take offense. You spot her later that afternoon in the solar, surrounded by younger girls, one of whom is awkwardly trying to copy Iselda's latest style. Vian sips her wine and remarks too loudly, "In my day, we braided with dignity, not drama." The girl fumbles the twist and pokes herself with a pin. Vian scowls, and the competition begins, because court politics aren't just played with titles and alliances. They're played with threads, glances, braids, and rivals. Lady Vian has worn the same tightly woven crown braid since before half the girls here were born. And now someone younger has captured attention with a single rosemary sprig and a braid not found in any etiquette manual. You can feel the challenge rising like steam from a boiling pot. It won't be long before Vian responds. But Iselda doesn't worry. She walks through the afternoon light, her new braid bouncing slightly against her shoulder. She pauses to talk to a musician, offers a smile to the gardener, pauses by the chapel and closes her eyes for a moment. Not to pray, just to listen. And you realize she's found her rhythm now. Her braid is her tempo, her statement, her flirtation, her defiance, and even when others copy it, they'll never wear it quite like she does. Because it isn't just the braid, it's who she is while wearing it. Afternoon tilts toward evening, and the courtyard softens under the golden hush of fading light. You find yourself following Iselda once more, this time into her favorite place, a quiet, square garden tucked beside the apothecary wall. It isn't part of the formal castle grounds. No hedges shaped like animals here. No perfumed nobles strolling arm in arm. Just herbs, soil, and calm. The kind of place where thinking feels easier, where secrets feel safe. She kneels beside a patch of rosemary, the same kind that once lived in her braid. Her fingers move gently through the stems, not to pick, just to touch. She closes her eyes, inhales deeply, and lets the scent settle around her like an old memory. Here, she's not a lady of court. Here, she's simply Iselda. And you can tell it's a relief. A breeze stirs her hair slightly, lifting the loose end of her braid, now draped over her shoulder. It swings once, gently, like it's exhaling with her. Historians still argue whether noblewomen tended gardens themselves or merely supervised others. But letters and journals suggest many did both. The garden was one of the only places they weren't watched so closely. Here, no fan-fluttering rivals, no lords pretending not to stare, just sun and soil. A quirky story passed down in Wiltshire tells of a noblewoman who grew lavender, not for perfume, but to braid into her hair so she'd smell honest. Another cultivated mint behind her father's chapel and claimed it helped her speak better when near handsome knights. Iselda never says why she likes rosemary, but her hands seem to know. She plucks a single stem and rolls it between her palms until the oils release. Her gaze drifts across the garden to the worn bench beneath the elder tree, to the broken sundial that hasn't told time since the last frost. This is where she comes to unbraid her thoughts. You hear steps behind you, soft, careful, but not sneaky. Someone who wants to be noticed, but only a little. She looks up. It's not the knight. It's one of the younger maids, barely 16, cheeks red, eyes wide. Lady Iselda, she says, breathless. Lady Vian's. She's doing something with her hair. Iselda raises one brow. Oh? She told her maid to use 2 combs and a fishbone twist. And she's wearing the braid down the back, just like yours yesterday. Iselda lets the words hang in the air like perfume. Then she smiles, just slightly. She's going to pinch her scalp if she's not careful, Iselda murmurs, returning her attention to the rosemary. Fishbone with 2 combs isn't meant for a head like hers. The maid stifles a giggle. You're not going to respond, the girl asks. Iselda rises slowly, brushing dirt from her gown. No, she says. That was the response. And it's true, because you see it now, don't you? Every time Vian copies her, every time someone else loops ribbon through their hair, it only confirms what Iselda already knows. She leads, even without saying a word. But that doesn't mean she's not thinking about him. As she walks toward the far side of the garden, the side that borders the outer wall, her gaze flickers once toward the fig tree just visible beyond the iron gate. The one she mentioned. The one where they agreed to meet. It's almost time. She doesn't hurry. Instead, she finds the edge of the herb bed and lowers herself onto a small bench, her braid falling neatly over her shoulder. The sun catches the edge of the ribbon, and for a moment, she reaches up, unties it, and slips it into her sleeve. You wonder, why remove it now? But then, she pulls something else from her pocket. A new ribbon, softer, deeper in color, more deliberate. She ties it slowly, securing the braid with fingers that no longer fumble. The knot is small, tight, elegant, and when she stands, the braid sways gently against her back again. New ribbon, same rhythm. As she steps through the garden gate and onto the outer path, she leaves behind the scent of rosemary, the hush of lavender, and the memory of Vian's frantic imitation. You follow her along the gravel path, your steps falling into hers. The fig tree rises ahead, its leaves thick and low, its trunk gnarled and wide enough to sit behind, unseen. She pauses there, beneath the branches, and waits. Not long. Footsteps. And then, from the trees, He emerges, no armor, no title, just the night. And when he sees her, something in his face softens. He notices the new ribbon, the way the braid falls, the loose strand near her ear. He says nothing. She doesn't need him to, because today the braid doesn't speak for her. It speaks with her. She touches it lightly. A silent invitation. And he steps closer, closer than before, and waits. You stand in the hush between them, two figures beneath the wide fig tree, its branches curled like arms sheltering a secret. The garden is still now. The castle sounds far behind. Even the birds seem to have quieted. This moment feels like it's been waiting for them, woven in threads of time too fine for the eye to see. The knight's gaze flickers to the braid again. Different ribbon, slightly tighter twist, the same rhythm of care. It's new, he says, voice low. She smiles faintly. You noticed. Couldn't miss it, he replies. I was hoping I'd get to. They both glance at the bench, half-shadowed beneath the fig leaves. She nods toward it, and they sit, just enough space between them for propriety, but not enough to feel like strangers. For a moment, no words, just the soft rustle of leaves and the scent of ripe figs. Then, I don't remember you braiding your hair years ago, he says. I didn't, she replies. Not like this. He studies her face. Why now? She thinks before answering. Because I realized I didn't have to wear it for anyone else. But you do wear it with meaning. Everything we wear carries meaning, she says, but I decide which meaning to give it. He nods, quiet again. You sense his mind turning, slowly, carefully, like a knight disarming not an enemy, but himself. She reaches up and adjusts the end of her braid, where it rests over her shoulder. The ribbon catches the light briefly, then settles. You know, she says, tone softer. In some courts, braids were used to signal intent. A twist for honesty, a loop for secrecy, a spiral for wanting something to begin. He turns toward her. And which one is this? She meets his eyes. This one, she says, is for willingness. It lands between them like a ripple in still water. Historians still argue whether medieval relationships followed rules of formal love or quiet, practical arrangements. Some believe emotions were suppressed, tightly coiled like the braids themselves. Others argue the opposite, that everything had to be hidden inside symbols, rituals, styles, because speaking openly was too risky. But here, between them, the silence speaks clearly. The knight leans forward slightly. His hand drifts near her braid, not to touch it, but to hover near it, the way you might near something sacred. Can I tell you something foolish? He asks. You may. I thought about your braid all night, not in the way you think. I just wondered if it meant you were changing. And I hope you are. A breeze sweeps through the fig leaves. Her braid shifts. The ribbon flutters. She says nothing, but her eyes say, I am. A quirky court tale from Brittany tells of a knight who proposed not with a ring, but by brushing his hand along the braid of the woman he loved twice. Once for the question, once for her answer. This knight doesn't touch her braid, but he does brush his hand close to hers, and she doesn't move away. You notice how their bodies have shifted closer, naturally, slowly, like leaves leaning toward light, not touching, not daring, but wanting to. I'll be here again tomorrow, he says. Same time. Will your words be the same? Probably not, he admits. But my thoughts will, She nods, then stands, not quickly, not with urgency, but like someone who said what needed to be said, and who now chooses to end the moment. With grace, her braid swings behind her, and you feel its weight differently now. Not just strands of hair, but a history built in layers. Each twist a day, each knot a choice, each ribbon a voice she didn't raise but wore instead. He watches her walk away. He doesn't follow, but his eyes remain, long after she's gone from view. As you walk beside her back toward the castle, you sense her calm, not giddy, not romantic, just settled, like someone who has chosen her story and isn't afraid to let it unfold, one loop at a time. And when she reaches her chamber, before even removing her shoes, she does the same thing you've seen her do every night now. She unties the ribbon, unbraids her hair, slowly, intentionally, thoughtfully, and places the ribbon by the window, letting the moonlight touch it. A reminder that what she wove today, she may weave again tomorrow. The moon sits low and round outside the window, pouring silver light across the floor of Iselda's chamber. She sleeps now, the unbraided waves of her hair spilling over the linen pillow like threads of story waiting to be retold. The ribbon rests quietly beside her comb. The rosemary sprig, dry but still fragrant, lies curled like punctuation between them. You hover in the silence, that in-between space where dreams and memory brush past each other. Because something is happening here, not loud, not fast, but unmistakable. The lady is becoming, and in the morning, she'll braid again. Not because she must, because she chooses to. Dawn arrives with no fanfare and no feast bell. Just the whisper of light against the tapestry and the quiet creak of wood as she stirs beneath the covers. You notice her fingers move first, reaching for the comb before her eyes even open. You've seen this before, but today her hands don't hesitate. She rises, walks to the mirror, pulls the long curtain aside to let in light, and begins. This time, the braid is different once more. A blend of two traditions, part Provençal loop, part northern coil, a style that technically shouldn't work, but somehow does. It rests across her back in two plaits that twist and join at the base, secured with a knotted ribbon the color of dried rose petals. You see her pause to examine it in the mirror, not to admire, to study, like an artist reviewing a sketch, not for praise, but for refinement. She breathes out, nods, then leaves. This day begins without the drama of a feast, but the castle still buzzes. There are guests arriving, a small council meeting. Rumors of trade negotiations. Even Lady Vian is too busy to insult anyone directly, though you hear her mutter something about braids making women lazy. Yet Iselda moves through it all like water through reeds, effortless, and unseen only by those too proud to look. You follow her to the library this morning, a long, narrow room with sun-warmed stone walls and heavy wooden tables. Here, parchment lives beside candle stubs, and the dust smells almost like cloves. She's not alone. The knight is there, seated quietly near the window, a book open in his lap. You wonder if he reads it, or if it simply gives him an excuse to wait. She doesn't walk directly to him. Instead, she trails her fingers along the spines of books, slowly making her way down the aisle, her braid moving with her like a soft banner, catching his attention before she speaks. When she stops beside him, he closes the book without looking at it. "I was hoping it would be this one today," he says, nodding toward the braid. "It wasn't meant for you," she says evenly. He smiles, all the better that I noticed. Then she raises one brow. "You're confident this morning." "No," he says, "just lucky." They sit across from one another now, at a table streaked with old ink and sunlight. No one else speaks. Even the steward passing by with parchment keeps his distance. You can feel it again, the braid working its quiet language. Not shouting, just speaking clearly. Historians still argue whether the act of self-braiding symbolized autonomy or mere necessity. Some say noblewomen who braided themselves rather than using a maid were seen as rebellious or practical, depending on the region. Others believe it was a sign of spiritual discipline, like dressing one's soul through the strands. A quirky tale from a northern abbey tells of a nun who, before taking her final vows, braided her hair backward, so no man would ever see her beauty. Some say it made her holier. Others say it made her unforgettable. Iselda braids hers forward, not out of rebellion, out of honesty. The knight runs a finger along the edge of the book, tapping once. Would you ever show someone how to braid like that? He asks. She tilts her head. Are you asking for yourself? Would you laugh if I was? No, she says, but I'd be surprised. He grins. I've done stranger things in armor. You laugh, and so does she, softly, not loudly, but fully. And in that moment, the braid becomes something more than style, more than symbol. It becomes shared, a conversation between them that doesn't need to be written or whispered. She leans slightly closer, her voice lowers. There's a trick with the middle strand, she says. It carries the tension, like the spine of a sword, exactly. And if you pull too hard, it knots, or snaps. He nods, thoughtful. And if you don't pull enough, it unravels. You both sit in silence, the metaphor resting between them like a third person at the table. When she rises, he doesn't follow, but you know he will, later, because the braid has said enough for now. Back in her chamber that evening, she unbraids slowly. Each twist loosened is like a line unwritten, a breath let go, a decision released. She hangs the ribbon beside the window again, where it catches the pink of the sunset. She doesn't need to say it, but you understand. The braid worked today, and tomorrow, a new pattern will speak again. Morning comes with a hush of golden light spilling across the window ledge, warming the folds of Iselda's linen sheets. You hear the first sounds of the castle waking, soft footsteps, distant water being poured, a rooster too proud of itself. But her room remains still, peaceful, as if the world has paused to let her think a moment longer before stepping into its current. She rises slowly, stretches, then moves toward the mirror with an almost ceremonial grace. Today, something is different. Her hands hover over the comb and ribbon, but she doesn't reach for them right away. Instead, she opens the carved wooden box tucked beneath her vanity drawer, the one she almost never touches. Inside, nestled in a square of silk, are old trinkets from another time. A faded hair brooch, a scrap of a veil, a tiny silver thimble, and at the very bottom, a ribbon of deep green velvet. She lifts it gently, smells it, and smiles. You don't know why this one matters more, but it does, because today's braid will carry history. The braid begins simply, a tight base at the crown, then 3 long loops that twist together near her collarbone. It's precise, thoughtful, almost ceremonial. She ties it with the green velvet ribbon, and when she turns to face the day, it's not just her expression that's composed, it's her intent. She walks not to the hall or the garden this time. She walks toward the armory. Yes, the armory. Stone walls, iron smell, echoes of long-forgotten clangs. Not the usual place for a noblewoman, especially not one who wears her hair like a love poem. But this morning, Iselda is searching for the knight, and she finds him, leaning against a barrel, one boot up on a rack, sharpening a dagger without much effort. He looks up, his brow rises. The green suits you, She cocks her head. You recognize it? I do. So do you. It's from the old betrothal feast, the one before her first would-be match, dissolved like mist. That ribbon was tied to her braid then, too, though in a different style. That day, it meant obligation. Today, it means reclamation. Would you walk with me? She asks. Anywhere, he replies. And so they do, through the long hall that runs beside the granary, down the outer path that skirts the training yard. No courtiers, no gossip, just the crunch of gravel beneath their feet and the sound of distant bird song. You feel it, don't you? This is not flirtation, it's alliance. Historians still argue whether romantic bonds in medieval courts could evolve into true partnerships, or whether status and family always dictated the outcome. Some letters hint at deeper unions where two minds, not just hearts, chose each other. Others say it was always performance. But this feels mutual. I remember the last time you wore that ribbon, he says after a while. She nods. It meant something else then. Does it still? No, she says. Now it reminds me I can rewrite things. They pause by the stables, leaning against the worn wooden rail. A breeze lifts the hem of her gown and flicks the braid forward slightly. He watches it settle. You know, he says, when you walk ahead of me, I try to memorize how it moves. She laughs, truly, this time. That's a very peculiar compliment. I never claimed to be normal. You're closer to it than most. They fall quiet again, until... Would you teach someone else? He asks suddenly. To braid? To wear meaning like that? She turns toward him, not surprised. Why? Because meaning is too valuable to hide behind silence. That stops her, and you see her consider it deeply. It's not just about the braid, she says at last. I know. It's about deciding who sees it. I know that too. A quirky chronicle from a minor court in Gascony tells of a woman who wore her hair in a different knot each day to reflect what law she was defying, her own quiet protest. The chronicler couldn't decipher most of them, but the people around her knew. Iselda's braid today is just as layered. It's not daring. It's not romantic. It's a message. I remember who I was, and I'm choosing who I become. When they return to the castle, they don't part with longing or glances, just a shared nod and a promise carried in silence. Back in her chamber, she removes the velvet ribbon, folds it carefully, and returns it to the silk-lined box. But the braid she keeps, tied again with the rose ribbon, now warmed by the weight of memory and reclamation. The ribbon that once said obligation now says, you don't define me. And the braid, it says, watch me rewrite it all. The next day opens under a wide sky streaked with the pale pinks and soft creams of dawn. The castle feels quieter somehow, as if holding its breath, waiting. You hear the distant bleating of goats being moved through the far gate, the clink of kitchenware being stacked for breakfast. But the corridors remain unusually calm. Iselda wakes slowly, her body and mind not sluggish but deliberate. The kind of stillness that doesn't mean hesitation, it means control. She lights a small oil lamp on her dressing table, even though the morning light is enough. It isn't for sight. It's for ritual, for rhythm, for intention. She doesn't reach for a ribbon, not yet. Today, she braids without an anchor. 3 strands, and no ornament, no herb tucked behind the ear, no nod to courtly trends or rivals' whims. just the act of braiding. Plain, quiet, sincere, and somehow it feels more powerful than all the others, because there is nothing to distract from its structure. You watch her part her hair with perfect symmetry. Her fingers twist the strands slowly, evenly, then loop them just once at the base of her neck. She lets the end hang freely, no tie, no finish. It is a braid in progress, like a sentence that hasn't ended, like she herself is not yet finished. When she steps into the castle corridors, you notice the reactions almost immediately. They expect a ribbon. They expect a pattern. Instead, they see something unexpected, a braid that isn't quite complete. Lady Vian passes her in the east hallway, eyes narrowing just slightly. She says nothing, but her silence is almost louder than her usual cutting remarks. Even the steward frowns as if trying to remember whether this style is acceptable. But Iselda walks forward, and you sense why. Today, her braid isn't meant to communicate anything to them. It's meant to speak to herself. Historians still argue whether noblewomen had full control over their appearance or simply chose from a menu of approved expressions. Some scholars suggest braids were part of daily court politics, tools for alignment and submission. Others argue that what began as duty became deeply personal for many women. The truth? Iselda's braid says, "Today, I belong only to me." You follow her to the west wall, where the training field lies beyond a row of archways. From here, you can see the knight in the distance, sparring, not for battle, but to stay sharp. His movements are controlled, thoughtful. He hasn't seen her yet, but you know he will. She doesn't call out. She doesn't interrupt. Instead, she leans against one of the columns, watching. And when he finally notices her, sword lowered, hair damp with sweat, he stills, sees her braid, tilts his head. "It's unfinished," he says as he approaches. "It's not meant to be finished yet," she replies. He studies it for a moment longer. That's bold. It's honest. I like it. Do you? I like everything you do that makes people stop and think twice. She doesn't smile, but her eyes gleam, just faintly. "You ever consider that some of us don't want to be thought about too much?" she asks. "Too late for that," he replies. They walk along the field's edge now, slow and easy. You notice that she doesn't touch her braid at all, doesn't adjust it, doesn't explain it. And in doing so, she turns the style into a challenge. Let them ask questions. Let them guess. Let them feel uncomfortable not being told what something means. A quirky note scribbled in the ledger of an abbess from Kent speaks of a visiting noblewoman who wore her hair half braided as a sign she was half bound to no one. The abbess wrote, "She made us all look twice, for she declared her freedom with her back turned." Today, Iselda does the same. When the knight finally returns to his duties, she heads to the north terrace, quiet, ivy-covered, her favorite place for writing. She opens a thin journal, the one with the pressed lavender hidden inside, and begins to write. Not a letter, not a list, just thoughts. Words like, "When no one tells you what a braid must be, you remember how it once felt to be whole without adornment." And, "Today, I am not a display. I am a page still being written." She pauses, runs her finger down the paper, tucks the loose end of her braid over her shoulder, and keeps going. No ribbon, no symbolism, just clarity, just herself. Later that afternoon, the castle prepares for the small feast honoring a minor diplomat. Everyone is expected to attend, and Iselda knows the expectations. But she doesn't change her braid. She arrives with it exactly as it was, 3 smooth strands, no tie, the end loose, trailing like a line unfinished. The diplomat blinks when he sees her. Even the Duchess hesitates before commenting, but no one asks. Because the moment they do, they reveal they're unsure, and uncertainty in court is weakness. Iselda knows this, and she holds it quietly, like a secret tucked in the hollow of her neck. You follow her back from the feast, the soft murmur of flutes and clinking goblets still echoing faintly in the corridors behind her. The braid remains unchanged, still loose-ended, still unfinished, swaying behind her like a curtain half drawn. And yet, despite its simplicity, or perhaps because of it, the braid has stirred more glances than even the most jeweled coiffures in the room. A maid passing by with linens lowers her eyes as Iselda passes. A steward whispers something to a page, both turning to look before they remember they shouldn't. Even the Duchess herself had offered a single, hesitant remark, "Is that intentional?" To which Iselda had answered only with a bow of the head and nothing more. She has let the question hang in the air, and in doing so, she has made herself the author of the mystery. You see it, don't you? Power not in being explained, but in being wondered about. She steps onto the North Tower balcony now, where the wind moves freely and the moon has begun to rise in full. Its light catches the silk of her gown, and the loose braid dances behind her like a soft flame. The knight is already there, leaning against the stone railing, one hand loosely wrapped around a goblet, the other fiddling with a leather cord he's used 1,000 times to mend armor straps. He turns, stops, smiles. "I saw you weren't wearing a ribbon tonight." "Not every sentence needs punctuation," she replies. He chuckles, then nods. "Some of us struggle without it." She joins him at the railing. For a while, they just listen to the wind. Then, "I liked it," he says. "Not just the braid, the statement." "It wasn't one," she answers. He looks at her. "Wasn't it?" She exhales slowly. "Maybe it was for me." Historians still argue whether noblewomen used fashion to assert inner change, or if those interpretations were added centuries later by overly romantic scholars. But diaries, those rare and precious glimpses, suggest that yes, sometimes a hairpin meant heartbreak, sometimes a loosened braid meant freedom, and sometimes no adornment at all meant a private revolution. Tonight, Iselda's braid says, "I am thinking." The knight lifts his goblet slightly in toast. "To unfinished thoughts," he says. She taps hers against it, "and to those brave enough not to rush them." They sip in silence. Below the balcony, the castle's lanterns glow gently. The courtyard looks softer, smaller from up here. And you begin to realize something. This balcony isn't just a viewpoint, it's a threshold. From here, she sees her whole world and can choose how to meet it. She doesn't turn away from the knight, but she doesn't turn fully toward him either. She simply exists beside him, like a page that's only half written, but already meaningful. "I've been thinking," she says suddenly, eyes still on the courtyard. "About what?" "About what happens if I keep changing the braid." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if I keep evolving it, adding layers, playing with form, style, meaning, what if it's never the same again?" He smiles. "Isn't that the point?" She glances sideways. "Some won't like it." "They don't have to." I used to think I needed their permission." "You never did," he says quietly. "But I'm glad you know now." She lowers her goblet, turns to face him fully. Her braid swings slightly with the motion, brushing her shoulder, a gesture that feels almost like a signal. Not flirtation, not defiance, just presence. "I think tomorrow," she says, "I'll add a fourth strand." "That's untraditional," she grins. Exactly. A quirky poem from a 14th century Italian nobleman laments the day his lover braided her hair into 4 parts instead of 3, calling it a storm in symmetry, and confessing it left him lost in the path of her thoughts. Some dismissed the poem as overwrought metaphor, but others whispered she did it intentionally, just to watch him falter. Iselda isn't doing it for anyone else. She's doing it to see what happens. Because a braid, after all, is a form of design, of order. But when you introduce a 4th strand, the entire structure changes, just like she is. When she leaves the balcony, the knight remains, watching the braid as it disappears down the spiral stair. And you can sense it. He isn't confused by her anymore. He's curious. Back in her chamber, she doesn't untie the braid. She sleeps in it, lets it soften and twist and become part of the night. Not polished, not purposeful, just honest. And by morning, it will be a little messier, a little truer, like a thought that grew stronger while no one was watching. The braid is already unraveling when she wakes. You notice it before she does, a loosened loop slipping free near the nape of her neck, strands falling into a soft curl across her shoulder. It doesn't look sloppy. It looks lived in, like a truth that outlasted the night. Iselda blinks into the morning light. For a moment, she just lies there, her head turned on the pillow, feeling the weight of the braid, now slack and imperfect. She doesn't fix it right away. Instead, she stretches, rises slowly, and walks barefoot to the window. The air is cool and sweet with dew. You hear birds, real ones, not just the sleepy-sounding flutes of court musicians. Real wings, real song. She closes her eyes and listens. Then, finally, she reaches up and touches the braid. The moment her fingers find the loose loop, something shifts in her expression. Not alarm, not frustration, just a decision. Today, she doesn't rebraid it. She builds on it. You watch her draw a comb through the untangled section gently, leaving the rest of the braid in place. Then, with deliberate slowness, she separates 4 new strands, not 3. 4, a change she spoke of last night, a 4th voice in the chorus. A rebellion in plain silk. It's harder to braid 4. The rhythm changes. The fingers must move differently. The result is not symmetrical, and that's the point. She twists the 4th strand into the existing braid without undoing the rest, so the original is still visible underneath, like layers of thought built on one another. Then, for the first time, she chooses a new ribbon. Midnight blue. It's almost black until the sun hits it. She ties it with a knot that rests just above her shoulder. No bow, just a tie. And when she turns from the mirror, she looks sharper. Not less soft, but more formed, more clear. She walks through the castle, and the change doesn't go unnoticed. It never does. One lady blinks, another frowns. The steward stares too long and pretends he didn't. Lady Vian, of course, offers her verdict by lunchtime. She's experimenting again, she whispers behind her goblet. 4 strands, poor thing must be confused. But Vian's own hair? Tighter than usual. Glossier, too controlled. The reaction of someone watching the rules change around her. Iselda walks past her with the faintest hint of amusement. She isn't confused. She's curious, and that curiosity becomes the mood of the day. Even the young maids begin trying 4-strand plaits in secret. fumbling with their hair in mirrored spoons and glossy basin reflections. But no one gets it quite like Iselda, because she isn't just copying something different, she's inventing. Historians still argue over who brought the four-strand braid to prominence. Some point to Moorish influences, others to Italian weavers whose techniques made their way into noble courts through fabric guilds. But some say it wasn't about geography, it was about a woman who dared to do something messy, elegant, and new. A quirky carving in a cathedral choir bench, half worn by time, depicts a lady with four twisted locks winding around her head like a crown. No one knows who she was, but someone thought her braid was worth immortalizing. Maybe she felt like Iselda does now. In the library, the night finds her again. She's at the same table, the same shaft of morning light cutting across her journal. But today, she isn't writing. She's watching the way dust floats, watching how her braid catches against the edge of the chair. He sits beside her silently. Then, leaning close, he says, "It's changed." She nods. "Fourth strand?" "Yes." "Harder to hold?" "Yes." "More interesting to look at." He reaches toward the braid, not to touch, but to trace its shape in the air with his finger. "It doesn't sit flat," he says. "No," she replies. "Neither do I." He smiles at that, and for a moment, there's a closeness not just of presence, but of understanding. That a braid like this, lopsided, shifting, intricate, isn't trying to please anyone. It's trying to reflect complexity. She turns her head slightly, letting the braid fall across her collarbone. "You don't need to understand it," she says. "But I want to," he replies. A pause, then, "That's enough." They sit quietly for a long time after that, not reading, not speaking, just letting the braid be between them, a gentle, knotted manifesto of being unfinished, yet determined. Back in her chamber that evening, she doesn't undo it. Not yet. She lets the four strands tangle a little, sleep in it again. And in the morning, maybe 5. Maybe not. She hasn't decided yet. But she knows now she never has to ask permission. The candle flickers on the bedside table, its flame dancing quietly as the sun slides up over the horizon. Iselda is already awake, her eyes open but unfocused, staring at the canopy above her bed. Her head rests against the pillow. Her four-strand braid sprawled across the sheets like a script she wrote in sleep. It's messy now, loops slipped loose, ribbon twisted. One of the strands has come entirely undone and curled into something wilder, softer. She doesn't rush to fix it. Instead, she lets it be what it is, yesterday's expression, softened by dreams. The morning air is cool. Somewhere below, a pot clangs in the kitchens. A rooster tries again, less confident today. You smile at that. Iselda finally rises, stretches, and crosses the room barefoot. She pours water from the basin, dips her fingers, and presses them to her cheeks. The gesture wakes her, but it also centers her, like a ritual whispered only to herself. Today, she combs her hair with slow reverence, unknots the frayed braid one loop at a time, her hands remembering the movements not as habit, but as language. When her hair is loose again, it falls long and full, brighter than usual in the morning light. She sits at the edge of her bed for a while, just breathing, letting it move with the breeze that filters through the small arched window. You notice her glance at the ribbons on the table. All the colors, rose, blue, green velvet, and now gold. She chooses none of them. Not today. Today, the braid will stand alone. And this one, this new version, is bolder still, 5 strands, wider, thicker, unapologetically asymmetrical. The top is tight, but the lower loops are intentionally loose, like ivy climbing a wall, not forced, just growing. Historians still argue whether braiding beyond 3 strands was ever meant to be fashionable, or if it was born from craftswomen mimicking looms and basketwork. Some say it was a flirtation with the exotic, inspired by travelers from the East. Others think it was merely a practical experiment that someone brave decided to wear in public. But once worn in public, it became a statement. Iselda finishes the braid and secures the end with a small bronze clasp. No ribbon at all. Just the braid itself, holding its own shape. She studies it in the mirror, tilts her head, then, with an almost imperceptible smile, leaves her room. As she walks through the main corridor, you see the reactions sharpen, not just glances now, double takes. People actually stop. Even the Duchess's steward forgets to bow, caught off guard by the complex twist spiraling over her shoulder. Lady Vaillant doesn't speak when she sees her. She simply frowns, mouth thin, fingers twitching around her fan. She knows she can't copy this one. It would take a full hour of practice and the help of 2 maids. And still, it wouldn't feel the same. Iselda's braid today doesn't look deliberate. It looks inevitable. The night finds her in the garden by the well, where roses climb the wall and birds bathe in shallow puddles from last night's rain. He stands behind her for a moment, just watching the braid fall over her back like a rope woven of light and shadow. "That looks like it took effort," he says. "Everything worth wearing does," she replies. He steps closer. "You know, in another time, they'd write poetry about it. In this time, they just whisper behind their cups." He laughs. "I meant me." She turns, her braid swinging around to rest over her shoulder again. He reaches out, not to touch it, but to study it with his eyes. "It's different," he murmurs. "More intricate." "It's mine," she says simply. And that lands heavier than you expect, because it is every loop, every choice, every deviation from tradition. It belongs to her. A quirky tale from a Welsh village speaks of a girl who braided her hair so tightly and uniquely that the young men swore it would take a wizard to unravel her. Some say she married a prince. Some say she became a nun. But all versions agree, no one ever forgot the braid. Iselda's braid today is unforgettable, not because of symmetry, not because of color, but because it dares to be complicated. Later that day, during the afternoon gathering in the chapel courtyard, an envoy from another duchy compliments her in passing. "That's a soldier's braid," he says. "It holds." She tilts her head. "Or perhaps it's a philosopher's," she replies. "It questions." Even the envoy is left blinking. As twilight nears, Iselda walks the outer path again, tracing the border of the estate beneath the warm amber sky. Her braid bounces slightly with each step, never stiff, never static. And as she walks, she hums, not a court song, something older, wordless, a rhythm in her bones. And you realize the braid is more than just a message now. It's a companion. It holds the story of a week, of flirtation, of resistance, of memory reclaimed, of something unfinished growing bold. And she's not done yet. Evening folds itself into the stone walls of the castle with the soft hush of candlelight and long shadows. The lamps flicker in the hallways, casting glows that slide like whispers across the tapestries. You walk beside Iselda through these corridors, her steps slower now, her breath measured. The weight of the 5-strand braid sits gently across her back, no longer a novelty, but a quiet crown of her own invention. She returns to her chamber without ceremony. The castle is quieter tonight. No feast, no visiting nobles, no excuses to pretend or perform. Just stillness and the sound of firelight crackling softly behind the grate. She removes her outer gown, folds it neatly, then sits before the mirror. The braid reflects back at her, slightly loosened now from the day's wear, the bronze clasp tugged by motion, but still holding. She studies it, then smiles, and begins to undo it, not with haste, but with care, like unraveling a secret kept safe. Strand by strand, loop by loop, until her hair spills out again in waves. She combs it once, twice, then braids it again, not to change it, not to improve it, just to feel the pattern return under her fingers. Same structure, no ribbon, just quiet intention. And when she finishes, she rests her chin on her hand and stares into the mirror, the candlelight glinting in her eyes. This is what power looks like when it doesn't ask permission. In the morning, she rises with the same calm. No urgency, no rush. You sense that something has settled in her, not an ending, but a rooting. Today's braid begins differently. She parts her hair at an angle, not down the center, but slightly off to one side. The base is looser, the strands more organic. A hybrid style now, drawing pieces from her earlier creations. The tension of the three-strand, the quiet strength of the unfinished one, the asymmetry of the four, the complexity of the five. It isn't any single braid she's worn before. It's all of them at once. And this time, she doesn't use a ribbon, a clasp, or even a pin. She finishes the braid by weaving the final strands into each other, so the braid holds because it chooses to. Historians still argue whether hairstyles like these were taught from mother to daughter or shared between friends in secret rebellion. There's little documentation. Braiding, after all, was considered domestic, too ordinary for the chroniclers. But isn't that what makes it extraordinary? That something so ordinary could become a vessel for agency? A quirky legend from a small German court tells of a noblewoman who braided her hair differently for every suitor who arrived and refused all of them. When asked why, she replied, "I've already chosen. The braid is mine." When Iselda steps into the garden this morning, she carries that same energy. Not defiance, not arrogance, just choice. The knight is waiting, not in armor, not even in court dress. He's leaning against the old fig tree, holding 2 small cups and a jug of something steaming. "Mint tea," he says, lifting them. Not much of a warrior's drink, but she accepts one before he finishes. It's perfect. They sit on the old bench together, the one where they first spoke of braids and stories and silence. This time, they don't speak right away. They just drink. The garden smells like rosemary and thyme, warmed by the morning sun. Bees hum lazily through the air, and a small finch lands near the sundial, pecking at invisible crumbs. Then, quietly, "I was thinking," he says. "We could ride, if you wanted." She tilts her head. "Where?" "Nowhere in particular. Just away for a while." She sips her tea, thoughtful. "Would I have to wear a riding cloak?" "You could wear whatever you like." A pause. "Then yes," she says. You watch the quiet smile that spreads across his face, not triumphant, not flirtatious, just relieved, like someone who finally heard the answer to a question he'd never dared ask aloud. Later that day, they ride, not far, just beyond the orchard, through the path that winds into the hills behind the estate. The trees cast dappled light on the trail, and the horses move easily, sensing the calm between their riders. Her braid dances behind her now, caught in the breeze. It sways with the rhythm of hooves, brushing against the edge of her cloak, and he doesn't stare at it the way he used to, because now he doesn't have to wonder what it means. He just needs to be present as it moves. When they reach the top of a small ridge, they dismount, stand side by side, look out at the pale green fields spreading wide beneath them. The world feels so much bigger from here, but also more possible. She lifts her braid over her shoulder, runs her fingers down its spine, and says softly, "Next time, I might not braid at all." He nods. "I'd like to see that too." The wind at the ridge is playful, tugging at her braid, brushing loose wisps of hair across her face. She doesn't tuck them back. She lets them dance, wild and free, threads of rebellion against the structure she so carefully crafted for days. You stand beside her, feeling the world open up in front of her feet. The horizon isn't sharp today. It's soft and endless, the kind that makes everything feel unfinished in the best way. She doesn't speak again for a long while. The night doesn't push her to. They just watch together. Down below, the castle seems small, manageable. A dollhouse filled with secrets and glances and silk and rules. From here, those things feel far away. And her braid, loosened just slightly by the ride, rests like a story she's halfway done telling. "I used to be afraid of being misunderstood," she says at last, her voice barely above a whisper. The night doesn't move. He just listens. "I used to think if they didn't see the meaning in what I wore, in what I said, in what I braided, then maybe it didn't count." She lets out a slow breath. "But I was wrong." He glances over. "What changed?" She looks at him now. "I did. That silence that follows isn't empty. It's earned. The kind of quiet that holds respect." He nods. You know," he says, "I still don't fully understand how you tie them." She chuckles. "I'm not sure I do either. Sometimes." "Good. Then we're both students." They mount their horses again. The path home is slow, winding. When they arrive back at the stables, she dismounts without help, hands the reins to the groom, brushes the dust from her skirts. Her braid is almost undone now, but she doesn't fix it, because some things don't need correcting. Back inside the castle, the tone has shifted, not publicly. There are no declarations, no dramatic moments, but in the way people react to her, more measured, more careful. They've begun to notice the way she holds space, the way her hair speaks before her lips do, the way her choices don't seek approval. Lady Vian still glares, but now it's from a slight distance. And when a young maid asks quietly, "How many strands is that?" as Iselda passes in the corridor, it's not mockery, it's admiration. That evening, back in her chamber, she finally undoes the braid entirely. She stands before the mirror, hair in waves down her back, the end of one twisted strand still gently curled from earlier. She studies herself, not critically, but curiously, like someone noticing the changes in their own reflection and not minding them at all. She doesn't reach for the comb, doesn't reach for a ribbon. Instead, she begins something new, not a braid, a twist. Two large sections of hair wrapped around each other, looped and pinned to one side. It's softer, less structured, almost romantic, but not for anyone else. This is for herself. A style that says, "I no longer need structure to feel strong." Historians still debate whether twists like these were casual or ceremonial. They appear in wedding portraits and also in sketches of women writing letters or watering herbs. Some say they were used by women between braids, moments of transition. waiting, wondering. But to Iselda, they're not a pause. They're a choice to let the pattern change. The knight sees her again the next day in the great hall. He pauses when he notices the twist instead of a braid. New? He asks. Not exactly, she replies. It suits you. You say that about everything. Only when I mean it. She smiles, then moves past him to speak with a merchant from the southern ports. Trade discussion, gown shipments, things she would have let the steward handle weeks ago. But not today. Because today, she isn't playing at presence. She is presence. Later that afternoon, you find her by the reflecting pool near the chapel. She kneels down, her fingers brushing the water's surface, her hair falling over her shoulder in gentle spirals. The twist has loosened, but she doesn't fix it. She just watches her reflection ripple and reform. You know what she's thinking, not of court gossip, not of whispers. She's thinking of her braid's journey, how it began as expectation, then symbol, then resistance, then conversation, then ownership. Now, it's a memory, one she can return to when she chooses, but no longer something she needs to prove who she is. Because now she carries the braid inside her, in the way she walks, in the way she pauses before answering, in the way she looks out a window and sees possibility instead of limits. A quirky letter once found in a monastery's archives speaks of a Lady E who wore no braid the day her land was returned to her, after years of it being controlled by stewards. She walked into the hall with her hair loose, pinned only once at the temple, and said, I came to claim my name, not your customs. Maybe that wasn't Iselda, but it could have been, because this story isn't just hers. It's anyone's who's ever untied a knot and realized, I don't need to braid my meaning anymore. I am the meaning. Morning spills into her chamber like honey, thick and golden, softening the edges of everything it touches. The room glows, not just with light, but with a warmth that feels like arrival. Iselda wakes slowly, her body heavy with rest, her thoughts quiet and unhurried. She doesn't move right away. She just lies there, her hair spread across the pillow like ink in water. It's no longer braided, no twist, no clasp, just freedom. And for the first time in what feels like weeks, she doesn't reach for her comb as soon as she rises. She walks to the window instead, barefoot, wrapping her shawl loosely around her shoulders. The air outside is cooler today, fresh, with a hint of lavender from the courtyard gardens below. Her hair moves in the breeze like a banner unpinned. No symbol, no strategy, just presence. Today, she wears it loose, all day. The message isn't loud, but it's unmistakable. When she walks through the main hall, people look, but they don't comment. They feel the shift, even if they can't explain it. Because Iselda no longer needs a braid to speak. She's already been heard. She joins the Duchess in the solar just after midday. There's fabric to choose and letters from other courts requesting her opinions on trade partnerships and cultural events. Her insight is becoming valuable, not because she chased it, but because she grew into it. And now, she's not the young lady with clever hair. She's the woman who knows what her hair means, and when it doesn't need to mean anything at all. Even the Duchess notices. You're not wearing your usual braid, she says with a casual flick of a fan. Iselda smiles. No. Too warm today? No, she replies. Just finished with it, for now. The Duchess arches a brow, then slowly nods. Understood. That single word hangs in the air like an offering. Not approval. Not permission. So, recognition. Historians still argue whether the rare instances of loose hair worn by noblewomen in public, were acts of defiance or deeply symbolic gestures of new beginnings. In some regions, an hair worn down was associated with mourning, in others, with celebration. And in some rare cases, it meant rebirth. A quirky court diary from Navarre speaks of a lady who appeared at a midsummer council with her hair entirely loose, unadorned, saying simply, "I've decided to live differently." The scribe added, "She said little else, but the council turned after her." Iselda doesn't say those words aloud, but she walks through the castle as if she has, and the halls, so often loud with meaning and gossip, seem quieter now. The night finds her later in the day near the river. She's alone, sitting on a low stone wall, her feet bare and skimming the surface of the water. Her hair glistens in the sunlight, every movement like thread catching wind. He approaches quietly. "You really aren't braiding today," he says. She shakes her head, not looking up. "Not today." He smiles. "I miss it," he says honestly. "But I also don't." She tilts her head toward him. "Why not?" "Because this feels like the last page of something, and the start of something else." She watches the ripples her toes make in the water. That's exactly what it is. He doesn't sit beside her. He kneels, resting his arms on the wall, eyes on the water. "And what comes next?" She lifts one shoulder. "I'm not sure, but I think I want it to be mine." "You've earned that." "No," she says softly. "I've always had it. I just had to notice." A pause. Then she glances over at him. "You remember the first braid you commented on? Of course, it was about being seen, being different. And now?" She runs a hand through her loose hair. "Now I don't mind being misunderstood." That makes him laugh. A deep, relieved kind of laugh. You feel it, don't you? This moment isn't about romance or courtly gestures or performance. It's about peace. A woman no longer performing understanding. A man no longer needing explanations. And the braid, it's not gone, it's just resting. That evening, as the sun dips behind the chapel tower and the sky bleeds peach and purple, Iselda returns to her chamber. She lights a single candle, washes her face, braids a small section of hair, not all of it, just one loose lock near her left ear, and tucks it behind. Not for meaning, not for attention, just for herself. A reminder that her story can be quiet now, but still hers, always hers. Oh, night folds over the castle like a velvet shroud, deep blue, dotted with stars too old to remember their first light. You stand beside Iselda as she leans against the window frame, looking out at the dark fields, the flickering torches on the outer walls, the still silhouettes of the orchard trees. Her hair is still loose, except for that small side braid, soft and hidden just behind her ear. The castle is asleep, or trying to be. You hear it in the muffled steps of a guard changing posts, the creak of ancient wood settling into dreams, the occasional flutter of wings high in the eaves. Iselda stays awake, but she isn't restless. She's settled in a way that's quieter than triumph, but steadier than peace. She walks slowly across her room, brushing her fingers along the edge of her writing desk, then lifting her journal. The pages are uneven now, some smudged with old thoughts, others sharp with declarations. She opens to the middle and writes, "I braided to speak, I unbraided to listen." Then below it, "Tomorrow I may not braid at all." You can tell she means it, because meaning doesn't come from repetition. It comes from choice. She closes the book, tucks it into the drawer, and climbs into bed. The candle by her bedside flickers, guttering low, throwing shadows against the ceiling that look almost like shapes from stories. You watch her face in the glow, serene, unguarded, and when her eyes drift closed, it's not out of exhaustion. It's out of readiness. The next morning arrives gently. No bells, no summons. Just the slow stretching of sunlight across the stone floor and the soft warmth of linens pulled up to her chin. She rises slowly, her feet brushing the rug beside her bed, her hair a curtain of gold and shadow. There's no ceremony today, no performance, no ribbons lined up on the table, no mirror lit with intention. She doesn't even reach for the comb. She walks straight to the window, and you feel the shift. This is not the Iselda who wore green velvet to signal reclamation. Not the Iselda who tangled 4 strands like an unspoken question. Not the Iselda who stood on the balcony with unfinished loops and a burning need to be seen. This Iselda, she doesn't need to signal anything. She just is. A quirky line from a 13th century play, largely forgotten except for one scribbled margin note, reads, "She wore no braid and yet turned every head." Power Ladol, it seemed, had left the braid behind and made a home in her eyes. That line could have been written for today, because when she walks into the corridor, hair unbraided, gown simple, posture sure, people look, but not with confusion, not with judgment, with recognition. The Duchess nods without comment. Lady Vian, absent entirely. And the knight? He's waiting by the garden door with 2 cups of something warm again, just like before. When he sees her, his brows lift slightly. No braid. She shakes her head. Didn't feel like it. He hands her a cup. You don't need it. She sips, smiles. You never did, he adds. I know. They walk the garden slowly, not speaking much, just sharing space. The air smells of rosemary and soil. The bees move like punctuation, buzzing between blossoms with purpose. At one point, she kneels to touch a leaf, lingers there, then stands, brushing the hem of her gown. You see the breeze move through her hair, free now, not as a statement, but as a presence, as something that's part of her. Not dressed, not adorned, just honest. That evening, she writes again. This time, only one sentence. The braid was never about being seen. It was about learning to see myself. And after she closes the journal, she leaves her writing table and curls into bed, hair loose around her shoulders, one lock still bearing the echo of a twist, a loop, a story. Not the end, but a pause, a breath, a braid that has finally returned to the hand that first wove it. The last light of day falls like a veil over the castle, soft and golden. A hush settles, not because something has ended, but because something has arrived. Iselda sits in the chapel garden, alone but not lonely. Her hands rest in her lap, her hair loose and long, catching the wind as it moves gently through the hedges and low stone walls. She doesn't wear a ribbon, no twist, no braid, and yet she's never looked more complete. You walk beside her through the last minutes of sunlight, watching the shadows stretch. Even the birds have quieted, their songs turning to murmurs, their wings folded like prayers. There's no audience now, no whispers, no judgment, just breath, just being. She touches her hair absent-mindedly, no longer out of habit, but as if checking that it's really hers, that it's not some old symbol or requirement, but something alive, something chosen. And it is. Because the braid was never truly about hair. It was about voice. And now she speaks without saying a word. The knight approaches quietly. He carries nothing, no flowers, no offerings, no clever words, just himself. When she sees him, she doesn't rise. She just smiles and pats the stone bench beside her. He sits, and they watch the light fade together. A breeze stirs, lifting a single strand of her hair into the air, and he catches it gently, then lets it go. "You never braided today," he says. "No," she replies. "And maybe not tomorrow either." He nods. Then, after a while, "But if you ever do, I'll do it only for me." He smiles, and for a long time they say nothing. The wind hums in the rosemary. A bell chimes far off, and above them the stars begin to bloom. Historians may never write of this moment. They may overlook the woman in the garden who wore no braid and yet carried centuries of strength in her quiet. But you will remember, because this story wasn't just hers. It was yours too. The quiet revolution of learning to be whole, not through adornment, not through performance, but through presence. No ribbon needed, no clasp required. Just the knowledge that even when untied, you still hold everything together. She rises first, steps lightly through the path of lavender and thyme. He follows, and the wind carries one final whisper through the garden walls. You were never unfinished. You were simply becoming. Now, as your breath softens and the edges of the day dissolve, let this story drift gently to the back of your mind. Let your shoulders grow heavier with rest, your hands still, your thoughts like petals floating down a slow, wide river. The castle fades behind you now, its corridors hushed, its stone walls warm from the sun that once kissed them. You are walking away from it all, slowly, peacefully, down a long garden path where nothing is expected of you. There are no braids to shape, no ribbons to choose, no glances to interpret, only the sound of your own footsteps and the calm rhythm of your heartbeat in the quiet air. You feel the breeze play with your hair, or perhaps just your imagination, and you smile. There is no message to send, no meaning to decipher, just stillness. And in that stillness, you remember every moment of becoming is sacred, even the silent ones, especially the silent ones. You curl into your pillow now, limbs soft and heavy, the night wrapping itself around you like silk. The story has finished speaking, but its rhythm remains, like a quiet hum beneath your dreams, a hum that says, you are enough. You have always been enough. And whether braided, untied, or somewhere in between, you are already whole. Let your breath slow. Let the stars watch over you, and let sleep carry you the rest of the way.